Hi there, I'm Ethan McCarty. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Integral. We are an employee experience agency.
And I'm Assaf Kedem. I lead internal communications and content for BNP Paribas, specifically for the investment banking and capital markets groups.
Assaf, I want to start off with a question because we are in this completely natural environment of us interviewing each other. Nothing weird about it. So we're just going to be calm and chill and hilarious. Got it? Okay, so this is the setup. The setup for you, Assaf. What is up with self-service? I talk with lots of different communications professionals around the world, just through my work, running an agency. And it seems like there's a trend towards self-service to, deal with your own stakeholders, internally. How's that playing out at BNP Paribas?
For me, it's everything. I mean, it's the only way to do more with less, frankly, given how resource constrained we communicators are. What that essentially means is that we have a series of tools and technologies that a range of levels throughout the organization have access to and knowledge of operating, from junior to senior. And it's the only way that we can be empowered to be autonomous without relying on other people for help with execution because everybody's just too busy. So for example, if I want to launch a new employee newsletter, I have to set up the SharePoint as a database. I have to use the mass mailer tool to create the template. I have to draw images from an image bank that we have. I have to set up the distribution lists. That's what we mean by self-service. Each and every one of us can do that without having to rely on other people. And it's a good way to reduce time to market.
I've always felt, so I ran internal comms in-house at a couple companies, Bloomberg, IBM, and I felt like it was almost like, I called it corporate communications judo. Somebody would come at you with some energy and you had to redirect that energy, it'd be like, oh, I want a newsletter. And you're like, yes. And you would also like to write that newsletter, wouldn't you? Is it a little bit like that still for you?
Absolutely.
And it's a nice way to sort of empower your own stakeholders too.
Without question. I think that also the writing skill is very important. I like to say that, I make sentences for a living so that my client facing professionals can rake in the revenue by pronouncing those sentences.
Amazing.
That's really what content generation is all about.
Amazing. So kind of a separate question here, but not kind of, totally separate question for you. I know you through the lens, because we're both on the faculty at Columbia Strategic Comms program.
Indeed.
I know you through the lens of teaching crisis communications. And I'm just wondering, I know you preach the good stuff because people say great things about your course. How do you bring what you practice, what you preach into what you practice at BNP Paribas?
Thank you for the question. So I think there are three things that you have to have in place to communicate effectively in a crisis. First of all, the organizations that most effectively communicate during times of crisis are the ones that effectively communicate during peacetime, as you know. What does that mean? Well, communicating regularly and not just being reactive, but proactive.
That's like make a friend before you need the friend.
Absolutely, because by the time you need the friend, it's too late.
Oh, yeah.
So create, employee engagement, be honest and transparent, and also see to it that you're creating multiple touch points by using a range of tools and channels, in person, digital, all the mediums available at your disposal. So once you have that, you should be okay during a crisis, perhaps with some variation of messaging and frequency, but the principles of communication are the same throughout. The second thing I would say is it's important, once you do have a crisis, to establish a single point of reference for information that everybody knows exists. They knows where it is, where it resides, and that you can consult 24/7 without having to wait for the next update, the next memo or town hall. It can be a hotline, a phone hotline. It could be a microsite. For me, it's always been a carve out on the employee portal, a landing page. You can call it Transition Central, Emergency Central, whatever you want, but as long as it's there and available. And finally, I would say the third.
And people know about that before the crisis happens. Like that might be standing and it's like you put it up, there's a crisis, and when that peters off, you sort of deprecate it, but they could come back and that kind of thing.
Indeed.
So it's persistent, let's say.
Absolutely. And once the crisis occurs, you obviously refer them to that as a single point. And then if you're a large organization, and this is an exercise that continues throughout, you have to have all of your distribution lists updated and current.
Ready to go.
Properly segmented in terms of, I don't know, whatever it is, region, function, group, level, rank. And that is really an exercise that requires a partnership with HR because it happens, if you think about it, throughout the life cycle of an employee's tenure with an organization from the moment they're onboarded to the moment they leave. And it has to be updated so that you're not missing out on key constituencies that you need to communicate to.
Smart. I always feel like the hierarchy of information that you present during a crisis, particularly to employees, is critical. And let me see if this checks out with you. I feel like the first thing you should do is like, don't report the news. Somebody else is doing that. So you can say, all right, there is an incident, but like don't, in the count of casualties and like, don't get into that. So recognize the incident, but then like, are your colleagues okay? Then are your clients okay? Then what can I do to help? And then you get to, is there some other messaging about an opportunity here? Like a commercial opportunity? Because very often there is one, I mean, depending on the business that you're in, there is something where it's like, oh, wow, in addition to helping out our clients and people in that community, like if it was a weather event or something like that, there might actually be something, depending on your company, that your company can go do that is, commercially beneficial. But that's got to be way down the list after like, am I okay? Are my friends okay?
Sure.
What can I do to help?
Spot on. I would say, with slight paraphrasing, first of all, focus, who is the victim? That's the question you always have to ask yourself. Who is the victim? And that should be your point of emphasis. The other is, you said don't report the news. And I agree that the news doesn't need to be merely regurgitated, but sometimes you do need to establish facts. Because people might be getting conflicting facts from different sources. Tell me, how does internal culture affect external reputation, particularly during times of change?
It sort of seems like that idea of change management that we might have in our head, like there's these long periods of stasis and then these big sort of episodes of change, that's, sort of traditional change management. Seems like that's kind of gone the way of the dodo. It's like perpetual change right now. And the experience that employees are having every day, whether they're working remotely or in offices or on the factory floor or they're itinerant like salespeople, the experience that's happening for them every day is a public experience. And so the answer to the question is it affects the company's reputation greatly. If your organization is doing something even as mundane as, I don't know, changing its benefits or seems mundane, suddenly that can very much become a public issue, beyond the employee public. It can become a public issue that your customers and your shareholders and your other stakeholders really care about. And in fact, in our research, we do this research every year with the Harris poll called the Integral Index, which anybody can get at teamintegral.com. And we found that in that research, Generation Z and millennials are very, very, very unlikely to buy products from companies that are known for a lousy culture. So your culture and the merits of your culture is not just about recruiting and retaining people. There's a real product dimension and a commercial dimension to how your culture is perceived. And you don't have to Google very hard to find out what the culture is like at any company. You can look on LinkedIn. There's always a subreddit. There's Glassdoor. There's so many different places where your employees are radiating your culture into the marketplace. And so I would say the bearing on reputation and your brand is very strong.
Interesting. And I've encountered a term, that says that now basically the lines or boundaries are becoming fuzzy between internal and external, which is why a lot of communicators refer to it as mixternal.
Yeah, that's right. I think, I'm not 100% certain, but I think my former colleague, Sean Randall, coined that phrase. And so if you find he's got a Substack called Mixternal, but he used to work with me at Bloomberg, and he's now at a company called LAM Research, big semiconductor company. And I think that's exactly right. And I think it's been the case for a very long time. This idea of internality and externality I don't think it's been useful for a long time. And in fact, that's something that my team and I at Integral always talk about. And the way we think about it is employees are every company's first public.
Absolutely. So what communication tools and practices do you feel have been most effective in managing change with employees?
You know, I wouldn't necessarily point to a particular tool, but I think the practice of really sincerely activating first line managers in service of whatever that strategic objective is, there's no comparison. In our research, we found that when first line managers spend some time giving some context to their teams about the company's strategy and direction, and this, we're not talking about like giving them an MBA on it. We're talking about like, hey guys, our work on this team is important because name the strategic objective. Like we play a role in that.
Yeah.
That drives up positive behaviors by employees by more than 40 points. And the positive behaviors are things like going the extra mile for a client, defending the company during a crisis, saying positive things online about the company, and sticking it out, like staying with the company during tough times. So the very best thing that you can do, if you're not communicating, not just through, but with first line managers at every level, by the way, the CEO is a first line manager, but if you're not equipping first line managers at every level to do that kind of context and engagement, you can pretty much bank on having a really hard time with any change effort.
Thanks for that. Very informative.
Sure. Hey, Assaf, it was so fun talking with you. Are we doing a fist bump? Hey, why not? It's Asset TV, right?
Sure.
That's how we roll.